Hey guys! Today's video, I am going to be going over everything that I have made over the last 2 months. For those of you who don't know, back in March, I decided to take a break from filming because I had so many videos already prepared, 8 of them to be exact, that it felt weird to keep making videos knowing that it's just going to continually just be more and more videos piled up. On top of that, I was also starting to feel kind of burnt out from filming so much. I don't know how I got 8 videos prepared in such a short amount of time. Today's date is May 7th, and I decided to go on my break March. I'm not sure the exact dates. I want to say the 17th. Maybe it was like a couple days before that. But where this kind of started was I started a crochet project at the beginning of March, and I realized that it was not worthy having its own dedicated video. It was another sweater, it was the top-down raglan, things that I've all made videos about before, and it was just different yarn. So I really felt like I don't need to make a video. I also know that the crochet videos don't do so well on here, which is fine. It takes me longer to make stuff. So I decided, I'll just only make videos about the crochet stuff that I think would be interesting to watch. I actually resurrected my crafting journal that I started back in 2025 before I started my channel. I even crossed out the 5 to make it a 6. Like I said, I started it before my channel. It was supposed to be just a way to take note of all the crochet projects I was doing, but I kind of couldn't keep up with it, and I fell off from doing it. This video is probably going to be very long. Like I said, I have 2 months worth of stuff to talk about, and there will be timestamps like always. On March 6th, I started the sweater. It is a raglan top down. And I will say I have not finished it though. I kind of got tired of working on it. I got a lot done though. I got the sleeves done and I'm working on the torso. I figured I'd show you since it kind of kick-started this video. So not done, no collar on it, but full sleeves. Tapering, not my best work, but with cuffs. I am using the Big Twist Living in Fun Bright. Here's the label. And I am using my 5mm crochet hook, which I recently had to buy some new crochet hooks, so I have a metal one now. It is smaller than I've used before when making a raglan. I've used 5.5 in the past, so I had to kind of readjust my measurements to get it to work out correctly. The next thing that I worked on, because I wanted to use this time to kind of fix things and work on the things that didn't need a video, the black tulle skirt that I made a while ago in the video with the pumpkin print fabric skirt, I just added another tier to that. Nothing fancy. That was March 17th. And the very next day, March 18th, I started on something that I had been kind of thinking about wanting to do for a little while. If you know or not, I've made a couple of pair of stays for myself, and I wanted to take the... God, I'm not used to this. I've made a couple of pairs of stays, and I wanted to try my hand at making a corset. And I wanted to have one for myself, because one of my issues that I have with the stays is probably because there is no straps. It tends to fall down a little bit. But when I do get it to sit right, it's so high on my waist, because it's supposed to stop at the natural waist. It's not where like skirts and stuff would sit. And I have no support for those skirts through the use of the stays. So I figured I'll make a corset. I did a duct tape pattern, but I wasn't thinking and I didn't draw the lines on before cutting it off. I was kind of getting the pattern done in a rush. And I just used some scrap fabric. I'm not even sure which way is up. This way is up. So I had, I think it's 2 yards of this Halloween fabric, and the way it fits is not great. Like it's there, you can kind of see the shape, but it's not great. And as you can see, there is no center closure of any kind because I don't own any other separating busks like I used on my second corset. And the grommets are the kind that have the little cuts into them so that they spread open when you use the pliers, which make them very rough. And I couldn't get my grommet pliers, the cutting tool for that, to work. It's just dull all of a sudden. I don't remember that being an issue. And then all of a sudden it's dull. So I had to hand cut all the holes, and then using the pliers for the grommets themselves, it didn't want to work. They barely closed at all. So they have really jagged edges, and I couldn't even lace myself up because to get it on without a closure in the front, I would have to have somebody else lace me up, but I wanted it to be something that I could do myself. So I did the bunny ear method, but I tried to have it as loose as possible. Tried to get it on. It was a struggle to get it on by myself with it already laced but loosened. And then to try and tighten it, because of the really sharp edges of the grommets, the ribbon kept getting caught on it, and I couldn't even get it tightened to even see if it would be a good fit. Just the design alone was not what I wanted. I had wanted to have it kind of follow the shape of my stomach because I didn't want the corset to be tight around my stomach. And I know that there are closures, separating busks that are shaped to kind of curve out in the stomach area, but they're really expensive. They're called a spoon busk because it kind of straight and then it rounds out at the bottom like a spoon, and it kind of has that spoon shape in the front. So that I did not do much more with that. So that was the corset. Starting on Monday, March 23rd, was my big furry fursuit paw exploration. I had realized that I had a different pattern on my computer by Runner Rabbit. Yes, Runner Rabbit. Let me make sure I say that right. And I picked a bunch of fabrics that I had, fat quarters, washed them, and decided to make a pair using the Runner Rabbit pattern, using some really pretty space fabric that I had. It came as a pack of 5, I believe. And my first try did not go well. The Runner Rabbit pattern is very different from the spilt grape soda pattern. Let me show you. So Runner Rabbit's pattern only comes in one style, perfectly symmetrical on both sides. It also doesn't come with a lining, and you're actually supposed to create little pillows for stuffing to go into the fingers. The finger shapes are a lot different. This is inner, this is outer, and the fingers on the palm side are this one giant piece. So it really doesn't give you much option to kind of try and make it bigger. Here is the palm piece, and you can see if you're going to do 2 different colors for the fingers and the palm, yeah, it fits together this way, but when you're sewing it together, you're sewing it together like this. So then you have to like really stretch the fabric in the opposite direction, and I was really struggling because it's such drastic curves going in opposite directions. The back of the hand piece also has the same issue, but at least with the back of the finger pieces, they do curve. It does come with a pattern piece where the fingers are attached for the palm. So that is an option, but still, because it's such one single, like it's a single piece and the fingers are so close together, it really doesn't allow the option of just adding some extra seam allowance to make it a little bit bigger for yourself. It's also, as you can see, the fingers are really narrow, and my fingers, they're kind of chubby, so to fit 2 fingers into any of them would be kind of uncomfortable. The only spot that really works is the outer finger, and it would have to be ring and pinky. So I was really having a hard time with this pattern because of that. This pattern also comes with a claw piece. Obviously it is optional, but it is also the only option. It is like a large claw size, and that was also giving me issues. So I worked on those for 2 days until Thursday, March 25th. And I was regretting my fabric choice because of how much I liked the fabric. I took my dates are wrong. Hold on. Sorry, not the 25th, the 26th. Let me just fix that real quick. That's the wrong pin. Oh, I wanted to note, I use these really fun gel pens for this journal. I had bought them for my other junk journal, but it's too big to fit into the case that I'd put all of that stuff into, so I've been using it with this one. So, on the 26th, so I worked on it for 3 days, from the 23rd to the 26th, and at that point, I was just like, I don't know what to do. Should I just take the claws out? Because they were sitting really weird, and you stuff the claws with polyfill, and I tried to machine sew them in, and it caused them to basically sit up. I do have some pictures. I don't know how well it'll be noticeable, but I will post the picture of what they looked like at the first iteration. The next day, on the 27th, I tried again, and I seam ripped all of the fingers apart. I ironed fusible interfacing onto the backs of every finger and around the edges of the bean side, because I couldn't really iron on top of the polyfilled sections. I trimmed the claws. They were a little too long. And then I hand sewed it all back together. And they turned out a lot better. The hand sewing made the fingers a little bit wider so I can more easily fit my fingers inside. I ended up not putting I didn't do any kind of pillows onto the backs of the fingers because I was finding it uncomfortable. There's padding in here, and then there was padding in here, and it was not like a dispersed padding where it was all in the finger. It was its own little thing, and it just made it really tight in here. Plus, the interfacing inside of the fingers makes them a little bit stiffer, so they kind of stand up on their own. So this is one of them, using this space fabric that has a lot of green in it. And then the other paw I picked because it was this beautiful pink and blue, and it felt very trans colors. It also was this darker blue I used for the claws. I hand sewed the claws in. I hand sewed the fingers entirely together, both, this part where the claw goes in and joining them up. There's also no lining. I think I said that already. There is no lining. So they're still very comfortable since it's quilting cotton, and it was a washed quilting cotton. I had washed it. I also put squeakers in these. Made it a little bit difficult, and for some reason I can't always get them to squeak. but I like them a lot better. For each paw, I made the claws out of the same fabric, but for the paw pads and the beans and all of that, I switched the color. So as you can see, this one has the green and blue, and this one has the pink and blue. Except for the palm, I didn't work it out as well because I did the backs of the fingers. No, the backs of the fingers is always different. I did the fronts of the fingers on this one, the separate pieces version, because I wanted more of the pale pink and blue. And if I had done it where it was all one piece, I wouldn't have been able to line up this side with the like pink sections of the fabric, because it had these kinds of almost stripes of blue, pink on the piece of fabric that I had. So the use of the separate beans on this one meant I used up more fabric and didn't have any large pieces enough for this palm. So I used a different fabric from the pack, which is more purple. But I think it works out okay. It's not too noticeable. It is tighter around the wrist because of that curved nature of the wrist. But with the hand sewing, I definitely think it worked out a lot better. After that, so that took me from the 27th to the 29th to finish those. On the 30th, Monday, I wanted to see if I could make the spilt grape soda pattern bigger to fit a little bit better for my hands. So what I ended up doing was tracing all of the patterns onto paper and adding a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance to all of them. I cut out fabric for 2 sets of paws, but it was taking me so long to finish both of them that I never sewed together one, but I finished a pair. Let's see if there's anything important in here. I also added fusible interfacing to every single piece before I cut it out so that I wouldn't have to zigzag stitch the edges like I had been, both with the Galaxy pair as well as the patchwork pair that I have a video of. Some of the fabrics that I had picked out when I was washing a bunch of fabric, knowing that I was going to do more than one pair of paws, were some bright floral colors, a lot of bee motif on some of these fabrics. So the pair that I ended up finishing is this pair. Now they are much bigger. They fit pretty good, but I do feel like I have to like stretch my fingers out a little bit more to get them in there. I did not put tweakers in the paws. I also shortened the wrist section because the original pattern, even at its normal size, comes out very long. And at a increased size like I was doing, it would be even longer. It probably would have gone all the way to my elbows, and that was just too long. I also wanted to test out a different claw shape. The Spilt Grape Soda pattern comes with a myriad of claw shapes. So I chose their small claw, and I really like how it looks. It definitely gives like wild cat, big cat kind of vibes. So I'm probably going to use these eventually whenever I make my snow leopard. The making of the pattern was pretty easy. Like I said, I just traced out the pieces and then added the seam allowance. And the way that I sew, I basically sew a little less than 1/4 of an inch. So was it a less? Now I always say when I sew using the presser foot as my guide, it's a 1/4 of an inch or less than quarter of an inch. I don't actually know. I measured it on this little ruler, and it turns out bigger than 1/4 of an inch. You can see my marker there, and it's technically bigger than 1/4 inch because 1/4 inch is here. I don't know. They did come out bigger though, so I'm not wrong that they came out bigger. They did. I also lined them with an old bed sheet. I had a flat sheet because the fitted sheet had ripped on me. I also added this teeny tiny pink bias tape onto the bottom. It was actually too small for how thick it all ended up because of the interfacing, and then the bed sheet I ended up using the folded over like top edge. I don't know why, I just did. So it was a little too thick for such small bias tape, but I think the pale pink works with all the fabrics that I chose. It was leftover from an old project from when I was little. I think my mom sewed something. The bean side here, like I said, I had a lot of fat quarters that I was using, but I only had one of each color. So I, with this, was like, ooh yeah, I really like the pink and this yellow, orange floral fabric together. Let's do bees for the fingers. You can see there's little bees all over them. And I went to go start tracing it all out, and I realized I didn't have enough room for all of the backs of the fingers and the fronts of the fingers. So I actually, on both of these, only have 2 bees and then 2 of a kind of light gray. So I just kind of alternated it so it's not super noticeable. And it was the same for the other paws that I cut out but didn't sew. I do like how they came out. They're super comfortable. The bed sheet helps in making it feel very comfortable. I did some fun color matching for the palms. You can see I used this really pretty pink and orange floral fabric for all the beans. And for this paw, I used pink thread around the palm and blue around the fingers to match the bees, and then orange around the paw and blue around the fingers. So that is the other pair of paws that I made. Halfway through me making those paws, it was the beginning of April, because that took me until April 8th to finish those. I stopped on April 8th, and I decided that I wanted to do something that I have been wanting to do for years. It's a junk journaling thing. I really wanted to try this thing where you take manila envelopes and for every month create an envelope, a folder, whatever, not manila envelopes, these file folders, and make a spread basically for the month to collect all of your thoughts. I wrote some stuff on the back here. There's some little things. I have this envelope on the back. I put a quote on the front. I asked around, and somebody gave me a really great quote. You may recognize it. There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. Samwise Gamgee. So, a very good quote. And I basically just kind of used some scraps that I had, used up some stickers, and then I also used things that I got throughout the month. I thought I would have more to put in here, but it ended up not really being a lot. I created this little like notepad here out of tea-stained index cards, and I only ever wrote on the front page. So it just kind of felt like a waste to do all of that. And it's glued in plus tape to make it look pretty, and it's felt like a waste. That felt like a waste. I have still not made May's. I was very busy with the next project, which I will tell you about. So May does not have a folder yet. I might just wait until the end of the month. I don't know. But I made this for April, and I did get some use out of it. Basically, by the end of 12 months, it's not the end of the year, it'll be the end of 12 months, I'm going to bind them all together. But we'll see if I actually keep up with that. Something I have to skip forward in my notebook just because this got put in out of order. So mid-April, I don't actually know the exact date, I went to Michael's to see that they had the new Big Twist GG yarn. I talked about it. I made a short about it. I have one skein left that I can show you. So here is what they look like. They are a wool and acrylic blend, and they also have these little puffs of a contrasting color. I had bought 5 of them. This is the black, obviously. I had also bought the white blue, the retro, green, and dark green. And what I ended up doing was I was like, maybe I'll make pillows and pair up 2 colors and have each side be a different color. And I did that. So here is the first one. He got the white blue and the retro. I used the circle granny square pattern and I just kind of kept going. It's also the same pattern that you would use to make like a hat. Like if you make, like I made a bucket hat last year, and it's the same thing for the bucket hat because it's flat on top. And it's real simple. You just do 12 double crochets on the inside. And then the second row, you do increase into every one of those stitches. So 2 into the same stitch, that gives you 24. And then on the third row, it's every other stitch. So you do 2 together, then 1, 2 together, then 1. And then for every row, you basically add more spaces in between your increases. And I think it turned out great. I didn't put too much polyfill into them. I was using them for a while as back support here in the craft room, but I really like how they turned out. So I'll give you a close-up of this one. And then the other color is the green and the dark green. So here is the dark green and the green. And I think this one got filled a little bit more. Turned out really good. For some reason, I think it was this one, my counts were off every single time, but I also ended up with less yarn at the end. So I was only able to, so what I wanted to do with the tails, keep them attached and then pair them up, and with one color, do a single crochet connecting them as far as I can go. And then with the other color, do it in the opposite direction. And if I had any space where they didn't meet, I would add something else. For this one, I was able to make it this far, and I just had this beige yarn. But for this one, I only made it this far for the dark green and this far for the green. So I use a different shade of green all the way around. It's barely noticeable. It's slightly more saturated green. I think I had a green that would have probably been closer in color, but it's what I grabbed. I used an 8mm crochet hook, which is what it calls for. Yes, it calls for an 8mm crochet hook. It was pretty easy to work with. The bits like to either get caught up inside of your stitch, at least for a double crochet, or they will always end up on the back. At least for a project like this where I don't turn it at all. Sorry, my hair is bothering me. It's tickling my forehead. So for a project like this where you don't turn every row, it kept ending up more on the back than on the front. And you can kind of see how little there actually is. There would be times where I would try to force it to the front while working, and it would kind of mess with my tension a little bit, but I kind of, after a point, was just like, you know what, just let it do what it does, and it's fine, it's whatever. The last thing in the journal is the last thing I want to talk about, but I actually have one more thing that I want to talk about. That is, I don't know if I would call it artistic. I feel like it's artistic. It's definitely an outlet. You may or may not have noticed that in the thumbnails that I often make for my videos, there will be like little images, like cutout images in there, like a flower or two, just some kind of to jazz it up a little bit. And it's called a PNG because it has a transparent background. And I realized that I can make wallpapers. And I started making wallpaper with these PNGs, and I found so many of them. And this kind of became something that I would do at the end of the day instead of crocheting, since I wasn't crocheting the sweater. And I would do a mix of computer wallpapers, foam wallpapers, wallpapers for my iPad. Here's one that I made for my iPad. I even started making my own PNGs, either finding images on the internet and just erasing the background on Procreate, or taking photos and doing the same thing. Here's a kind of spring themed one that I made recently. It's just been a lot of fun. Lately, it's been mostly food focused just because there's more options with food. Here's a silly food one that I did for phones. But yeah, I've just been making all kinds of stuff. And that's been over the course of the last 2 months. And it's definitely like an outlet of just doing something at night that doesn't really have any, I don't want to say it doesn't have any consequences, because that's not what this is all about. Yeah, I don't know how else to talk about that. But I wanted to share it because I've been having a lot of fun with it. Now, this last project started April 9th, and I finished it today, May 7th. It took me an entire month to work on this. And it is a foam base fursuit head. I didn't originally want to make a fursuit head. If you watched my planning video for the fursuit series that I'm doing on my channel, I mentioned having 3D printed heads that I had bought, and I was going to use the fox one that I had bought. But it really bugged me, the fact that I had no idea how I was supposed to put it together, and that Googling how to fur a 3D printed head didn't give me a lot of information. But I already had upholstery foam. I had bought it during Joann's closeout sales, and I really only bought it with the intention of using it to make ears to go with the 3D printed head bases. So I started using that. I had 4 12 by 12 squares of 1 inch foam and 1 12 by 12 inch 2 inch foam, 2 inches thick, 1 inch thick and 2 inches thick. Did not know if that was right. These are the kind that you find that were meant to be pillows. It's a 12 by 12 inch like cushion, basically. And the reason why I decided I wanted to make it is because I found a tutorial from, I should look up the name. Who is the person? Did I even write it in here? Nope. I found a tutorial from Twiggy Leaf Creations on TikTok on how to make a fursuit head that is round and not the bucket method. I've talked about before how much I don't like the bucket method, because essentially all it is a tube of foam that you wrap around your head, cut out eyes and nose and a mouth hole, and start gluing foam onto that. And I need to be able to wear my glasses. I don't wear contacts, and I cannot see without my glasses. So to do that would be impossible, because I would have no room. The bucket head method basically assumes that you don't need glasses and you can just pull the whole thing on. It also feels extremely claustrophobic to have foam pressed up against your face. Even with a lining, it would still be extremely claustrophobic. But in Twiggy Leaf's tutorial, it basically is like a beach ball shape, where you have these triangle shaped pieces and a hexagon shaped piece that you glue it on, and it kind of domes it out, and you repeat it for the other half, and it doesn't have the hexagon, so there's a hole at the bottom, And basically it turns into like a beach ball. And then you would cut out a hole for the neck for your head to fit through. In the tutorial, they're like, make sure it's big enough for your head to go through, measure your head. And I'm like, well, I'm definitely going to measure it with my glasses so that I can slide it on with my glasses on and not have to worry about it. Cutting out the foam, I was definitely having troubles with because I thought my craft knife would not be a good option. And I figured I'll just use my paper scissors, my scissors that are for anything but fabric, because my craft knife, when I went to go cut, it would just press into the foam and the foam would do the thing foam does. And I wasn't sure how I was supposed to do it. And so I was using my scissors, but it made my cuts really jagged. And I asked a cosplay server that I'm on, and basically, I can't remember who said it, but you're supposed to do like little slices and just keep going deeper and deeper. It also doesn't help that my craft knife is extremely old. It's the kind, I'll show it to you. I actually have two now. This is the old one, but it's the kind where you break off a piece of the, break off a piece of that Kit Kat bar, break off a piece of the blade to get a new sharp edge. But the issue is that over the years, I have used the full length of it. So it didn't matter how many times I broke it off, it would always be dull. So I went out and I bought a new one. Yeah, I bought the same one, and it definitely feels wasteful because of the fact that there's all this plastic, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do when I finally run out on the old one. But I bought a new one, and it's extremely sharp. It probably wasn't a good idea, the fact that I was using it like this. It's full length at some point, but it is what it is. I'll post some of the progress photos that I took. I'll put them up right here. I didn't take many because I was so focused on what I was doing, but I was sharing it a little bit with people, both to get help and just because I was like, look how much I've done. The initial tutorial by Twiggy Leaf basically just covered the basics, creating the shape with a pattern that they had for free, and figuring out eye placement, adding extra foam on the front and the top to kind of help with the shape, figuring out the muzzle, the mouth, like the whole area, and like cheeks and stuff like that. And basically the style of fursuit that this is the kimono style, K-E-M-O-N-O, which is a style of fursuit that comes from Japan. And it's definitely more of a cutesy look. And I realized that I didn't hate it. Like, yeah, there are some that sway too far into one direction that I don't like, but a lot of the fursuits that I see that aren't the like toony American style are that. They're this cutesy Japanese style, and that's what this style of fursuit head was, because of the round shape and like minimal features. So I got it to a point where I had a muzzle on there and the eyes figured out. It came time for me to figure out what to do for the ears. The plan was to have it be a cat. This pair of paws inspired me to make a galaxy themed fursuit, and decided to go with a cat since I don't have any like domestic cat personas. Shaping the muzzle probably could have done with a little bit more shaping, make it a little bit narrower. But this is my very first fursuit, and I wanted to, it's basically just me trying it. Is it worth me to try and do it again with everything that I have learned? The ears, I asked the cosplay server, what kind of material should I make the ears out of? The 4 squares of the 1-inch thick foam that I had just barely was enough for me to construct the entire head, except for the ears. And originally I was going to use the 2-inch thick foam to make the ears and just like carve it out, but I didn't really want to do that, and I couldn't figure out the best way to do that. I got as far as to tracing my pattern onto it, and that was it. And it was just enough. It would have worked with how much I had, but I decided to go to Michael's and buy EVA foam, because that's what people were telling me to do, to get like thick EVA foam so that they would stand up and not flop over. And I did that. And it doesn't look like a cat anymore. It did not look like a cat anymore. My pattern didn't help. That kind of curve over and the shape, it was more cat ear shape before that part got curved over. That was not originally supposed to be part of it, but then it did end up happening, and it just doesn't look like a cat. And I also placed them too far forward, and it made the whole thing tip forward. I would put it on my head, and immediately the whole thing would just tip forward. And it is a little bit harder to figure out like how to get it to sit on your head when there's no padding on the inside. It's just completely round on the inside. And the tutorial by Twiggy Leaf didn't really say if you're supposed to put any kind of padding in there, and they didn't show it, so I didn't know if I was or not. I did end up putting a piece right at the front by my forehead and one at the back to kind of help it stay in place a little bit better. It wasn't enough for the weight of the EVA foam. I think I got like 8mm EVA foam, and as you can see, the ears were huge. They were so much bigger than they should have been. And I was just going to go forward with it, but the fact that it made the whole thing so heavy in the front, like it literally, like I could feel the weight. Putting it on, I could feel the weight, and the whole thing would just drag forward, and it was awful. Luckily, at the same time I bought the EVA foam, I also bought a 1/4 inch upholstery foam, and I am so glad that I did that at the same time. It was a risk taking the ears off because it would tear the foam. I used a lot of hot glue, but it was the best option in the end, and I'm so glad that I did it. I reworked the shape. I did a completely different shape and cut it out of the upholstery foam, and it is, did I say a 1/4 inch? I think it's a 1/2 inch EVA foam. Maybe it's a 1/4, I don't remember. Much thinner. And I also placed them farther back, which I definitely think helped with the whole look of the head. I did consider making the eyes a different shape, because the eyes that I have are not generally the shape of eyes that kimono fursuits usually have. They usually have much bigger, almost round eyes. And I definitely went with like a more closed cat eye shape, just because that's how I generally draw eyes. I'm not much of a like drawing artist, so that's basically what I ended up going with. Patterning the fursuit. So by the time I was done the head, Twiggy Leaf had come out with a tutorial on how to pattern the inside for lining. And it was difficult because the painter's tape that I had bought refused to stick to the foam. And even the duct tape that I have kind of didn't want to stick sometimes. But it was also such a narrow space, and the entire thing was lopsided from some of the initial pieces of foam that I glued to the front to help with the shape. Not the original shape, that one was perfectly round, but the additional pieces of foam that get glued to the front, the sides, and the top. And doing that kind of made it lopsided. I don't know how it happened, but it did. So I kind of had to pattern the entire interior of the head, both halves, because of the fact that it was lopsided, and also those foam pieces inside were not centered. So I kind of had to just pattern around it, and I was definitely not going to make the pattern fit those pieces of foam on the inside. So I kind of used the tape to smooth it out a little bit. So that made it a little bit better. It was easier because of it. I ended up using more of bed sheets. If you saw my Patchwork Paws video, I had some navy blue pillowcases from the same company that my green ones here are from, the Birklinen Percale Cotton. So I decided to use that for the lining. I really do not like working with the pillowcase, this fabric that this percale that this bed sheets are made out of. I don't know why. I guess it's a very tight weave. So sewing it either by hand or on the machine, it really does not like, the needle does not like going through it. It also frays. It's a woven fabric. So dealing with all of that, I'm like, do I finish the edges of every single piece? And there's a lot of small pieces at the front of the face. And I decided, no, there's not going to be any friction because it's going to be inside the head and it's never coming out again. I have decided that if I make another one, I'm probably going to invest in getting some of the scuba techno knit. It's not actually scuba because that is insulating and meant to keep you warm for scuba diving. It's supposed to be, it's the other kind of knit that's a similar feel and look, but it's lighter and it's more breathable. That's what you're supposed to use for linings. That's what I've heard. That's what I've heard everybody use for linings. I'll probably invest in getting some offcuts in no particular color to save me as much money as possible because that shit's expensive. But I got the lining in. I also realized while sewing it in, or when I was sewing the pieces together, that I cut my pieces out incorrectly, and all that time and care I put into patterning the entire interior meant nothing because every piece was going to be flipped to the other side in order to keep all of the Sharpie marks I had made on it in order to be able to cut it out because the fabric was so dark. Pencil doesn't show up on it. My heat erase pen doesn't show up on it because it's a light blue. Black Sharpie was the only thing that showed up on it, and I didn't want the interior to be covered in all of these black marks. So I was sewing it with the intention of that all being on the inside, only for it to then have the entire pattern get flipped. Luckily, it did work out. The differences between each half are minor enough that I was able to fudge it and get the lining in there. I can't hot glue it in like you would with the scuba knit because it's a thin cotton. Scuba knit is thick enough that you can glue it in and you will not notice the hot glue in there. So I talked to Beeshive, who made the patchwork jackalope, who had told me when they made that cosplay that they sewed the lining and the outer fabric through the foam. So for the lining, that's what I did. I have some long needles, pretty decent length. I got some thread and I literally would just go through the foam and sew it in. It's a pretty rough job, but I got it in there. Patterning the outside, I was like, I am not going to pattern the entire thing. That is ridiculous. I am only patterning half of it. So I picked a side and I patterned half of it. Now, I will say that the outside is also asymmetrical, especially the ears. The way that the back part of the ears curve, one side curves more than the other. So that is something that I knew I would have to deal with at some point. I was just like, I'll fudge it. This is not like a major project. I mean, it is a major project because it took me so long to make it, but it's not major as in it's not the Patchwork Fox project that I am filming. This is my test piece. And I had actually found more of the galaxy fabric because, like I said, it was these paws that inspired me to make it. So I found these were Joann's fabric. So I'm like, I don't know if I'll be able to find it again. I did happen to find it. The patterns, I think on like there's 5 of them. 2 of the fabrics, the inking, like the screen printing of it is much darker than the original pack that I had. One of them is a complete match. And then these 2 are, this one, I bought 3 packs of these. So I bought 3 packs of these new ones. So on top of the ones that I already had, I would have 3 of this fabric, 3 of this fabric, and then 4 of everything else. And that's 3 different colors. So with this one in the new packs, each piece from each pack seemed to have been cut from the same section, which I thought was really weird. And it's definitely similar enough that it works. This one, however, has less of the pink and blue and more of the darker blue. And I don't know, like, because I've never seen this fabric as like a full bolt. So I assume it changes from like this to more of this and then back to this. And the pieces that I have in the packs, that just happens to be all of them are less of the pale pink and pale blue, which is fine. It's you know, I don't have much of a choice. So patterning the head was easy. Patterning the outside of the head was much easier than the outside. I did the same thing as I did with these paws, and I put interfacing onto the backs of everything to make it thicker and a little bit sturdier, because usually fursuits are made out of faux fur, and faux fur is a much thicker, at least the good quality kind, has much thicker backing. So I wanted to have it be a little bit thicker. Cutting out all the fabric, making sure it had a decent amount of seam allowance, wanting the seam allowance to be the same across all the pieces. So I'm literally measuring it out because I wanted to be able to take the 2 pieces, line them up on the cut edge and it be right. Making sure all of my tick marks were on there because, oh my god, with the lining, my tick marks were haphazard and too similar from piece to piece. So I had a little bit more care with the outside where I would have a variation between a single tick mark, 2 tick marks, 3 tick marks, even 4 tick marks. And I would switch it up between pieces. I had issues with the interfacing for whatever reason. It was not bonded well to the fabric. And I had washed all these fabrics as well. My iron is kind of broken. It's a very old iron. I can no longer fill it with water to have steam inside of it because it will leak a lot. And I found that without steam, high temperatures will cause polyester thread to melt, will cause interfacing to actually shrink. I actually had that happen to a piece that I decided to go over with the iron a second time after I had cut it out, and it made the entire piece's interfacing shrink, which I didn't know was a thing that could happen. I always seem to have issues with interfacing, fusible interfacing. So I was having issues with the interfacing peeling off of the fabric, and I couldn't just iron them again because I was using my heat erase pen. My heat erase pen works much better on the interfacing, transferring ink to it versus like a pencil, because I have to like go over it a couple times to make it seeable, and I didn't want to use like a regular pen because I didn't want any kind of like color to be seen through the fabric just in case. So I ended up having to trace over all of my pen marks with pencil to then be able to iron it again, and the heat erase would disappear, but I would still have my marks. For the second half, so I started with one color of fabric. For the second half, I tried to really iron it well and like press it down so that the glue side would stick to the fabric. Still didn't work. I still had issues where it would come up, and eventually at that point I just gave up. With all of the curves, making sure to cut notches into everything so that it would lay as nice as possible, but also not really being able to iron much at first because I would lose my marks for sections that I haven't done yet. Having to iron everything on a pressing ham, which I have one, but it's homemade and it's not really round enough. It's kind of flat, so it's really difficult to iron things that have curves on a flat object when it's supposed to be rounded. So it was definitely a lot of difficult steps. I had to do some hand sewing for some of the smaller parts. That was annoying. And then it came to fitting, and once again, when I was cutting out the first half of one fabric, I realized that it was not the side that I had actually patterned. It was going to end up being the other side because I didn't reflect my patterns. I didn't flip them over and do it on the other side. So that was a whole ordeal. Not that the colored matters as much because of the paws. You can wear them on either hand. There is no left and right. But it was just the fact that the entire time I thought I was making it for the side that I had patterned first. But I ended up not making it for the side that I patterned first. I made it for the other side. And then I managed to get everything done. I thought I would get it done last week. I was nowhere near done last week. I have one video that is going up this Sunday. And so I was like, I want to get this finished when I have 2 videos left. But I didn't get it finished by then. But I have one video as a little bit of a buffer. So this week I really hunkered down and I got the entire first half finished. I got the entire second half sewed in just a couple of days, including hand sewing. And then it was time to figure out the ears. Now, the one thing about me patterning the head, I did not pattern the ears because I already had a pattern for the ears. I already had paper from when I was cutting out the foam for the ears. So I figured it would be fine to just use those pieces and not actually pattern the ear out. I think that was wrong. It doesn't fit. I've had so many issues with the ears. I probably should have patterned it out with tape. I just didn't feel like doing it because there's a lot of right angles from the ears because of the fact that it was cut out of foam and I didn't bother rounding any of those edges. So it caused a lot of issues. When I had both halves finished, I decided to, a couple of times, try them on. The ears weren't fully sewn together yet. Try them on, see how much they overlapped in places, see if they fit. For some reason, even though I had been trying it on in pieces, it no longer fit in the back. Neither side meet the middle anymore. And the ears just refused to fit at all. I was like, I have to finish sewing this together. And I sewed parts of the ear together, not all of it, but some of it that I definitely needed done in order to sew the 2 halves together. Sew the 2 halves together, and it fit even worse. And it was actually really hard to get it on the head. I don't know why it was so tight. And I didn't even completely sew it all the way around the center. I only sewed it from the top of the head between the ears all the way down to the front. The back is completely open. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. It's too small around the top part of the muzzle. It's too tight between the eyes. It doesn't fit at all around the ears. And the between the eyes part, I at least know why it doesn't fit there. It's because on the first half, I sewed the 2 pieces together that would connect the upper and lower eye together. I did that by hand. And then I went and I tried it on, and it was like, oh, it's too loose. I'll just sew it a little bit deeper in on the machine and cut off the excess. So I did that. And then when I came to, that was a couple days ago. think it was Monday, when I came to sew the same section for the second half, I just immediately sewed it on my machine deeper and not following my marks. And I deeply, deeply, deeply regret doing that because it now no longer fits here, which causes it not to fit here. And the eyes, it doesn't want to fit. What I ended up doing for the eyes, because I don't have the like stuff that you see, like the fursuit heads with the mesh that you paint on and all that kind of stuff, and like it's set into the head and all that kind of stuff. I don't have any of that. But because it's a galaxy cat, I figured it doesn't really need normal looking eyes. So I took some black tulle fabric left over from my tulle skirt and some white tulle fabric that I had with iridescent hearts on it, layered it black, white, black, so that it would be easy for me to see through on the inside and would kind of obscure the white on the outside, but you could still see the iridescent hearts. Because it's a galaxy cat, it can have whatever kind of eyes I want. So I sandwiched those together, I quickly stitched them together around the outside edge, and then I decided to glue them on, but glue on those outside edges of the rectangle so they weren't anywhere near the actual eye socket. Oh, I had glued the lining down first that was on the inside of the eye sockets. And the plan was, once it was all on, was to fold in the edges around the eyes and hand sew it in. And so yesterday, after I got the head on, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to finish this. Not completely. I fixed the ear issue so that the inside ear fabric and the outside ear fabric would actually touch. I just trimmed away some of the foam and started sewing in the mouth, hand sewing. I had to hand sew everything because, again, while I might have been able to glue it in, it's a very tight fit. It does not. It is not a good. It's a good first attempt, but it's not great. And the eyes was really hard to sew in, and I did give up on sewing the eyes. And I didn't even bother finishing the ears because they're so wonky and there's so much gathered fabric. So let me show you Nova, my galaxy cat. I don't hate him. I think he's really cute. He probably could do with a nose, but I don't really see the point. All of the stitches around the mouth up close are visible. I didn't try to hide it super well, but I think it turned out okay. I didn't do great with patterning both the inside and the outside of the mouth. The fabric just barely reaches the lining on the top lip, and that's only because of the hand sewing. As you can see with the eyes, I started sewing it right here. It was very difficult, and then I gave up. So all of this is unattached. But you can see how the mesh turned out. I think it's really, really pretty. It's got that sparkliness, but it's just kind of black. You can see I have all this extra fabric here, which is the side I didn't pattern. But I also, for some reason, have all this extra fabric here, which is the side I patterned. And I didn't even bother sewing the ears together because it's just really bad. And then on the back here, it doesn't even meet anymore. I pull and tug on it as much as I want, but it doesn't even meet. You can actually see my original markings for the center back are these dashed lines. But then I was looking at it and I went, that's not actually the center. This solid line is. I put a new center line. And because I patterned this side up to the dashed line, I went, surely I would have extra fabric on both halves so that they would meet. But now they don't. And I didn't bother sewing it up on the machine. One, I probably wouldn't have been able to get on the head anyway, because it's a narrow opening on the bottom and it would not fit around the width. But it just doesn't match up anymore, and I don't know why. I can show you the inside as best I can. There's the dark blue bed sheet. Oh, there's an eye. It's kind of hard to show. I did okay with the mouth area and the eye area. I don't really know what to say. I mean, you can see even the bottom of the fabric and the lining doesn't match up. Even though I patterned it to meet that edge. So it meets on this side because I patterned it to meet this side as best as it could. But on this side, obviously it doesn't because it's all different shape. But I did learn a lot, especially considering my patchwork suit is also made out of quilting cotton. I just need to take more care with the head. I really don't know what else to say about this. Like, he's cute. I think he's cute, and maybe someday I'll finish it. But for right now, no. I'm tired. Like I said, I've been working on him for an entire month. April 9th to today, May 7th. I do not want to work on him anymore. I want to do other stuff. I want to make videos again. I don't know what else to say. I have never talked this long before. No. I have not talked this long in a very long time. That's it, though. That's everything that I've made in my 2-month break from filming videos. I will continue to not film any crochet videos that I find quote-unquote boring, or I should say any crochet projects that I count as boring. Things that are just repetitive that I've done before, like the sweater. I do have a crochet idea, a very quick one that is interesting, that will be next week's video. I don't know how to finish this video. I hope you enjoyed seeing everything that I've made in the last 2 months. I know it's a lot of talking. It's going to be a long video. I hope you, I don't know. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy crochet, sewing, or any other kinds of crafts, please consider a follow. I upload every Sunday, and I hope to see you there. Bye. Oh my God.